now go through and design the agent for experience that help customers like Bruno. She needs to define how the agent is going to behave. So what should it say, what should it know? And then that's where the agent builder will come in. And it's where Serena brings her agent to life. So see if I can find it back up and running in here, and maybe not. One moment, everyone, I will need to pause. If I can get some technical assistance in the front, please. Sorry everyone about that. We're having some issues with logging in right now. So I do have my demos. I will walk through what the setup is on the screen in the recording though. But with that said, Cora is now going to come over into the agent builder. And at this stage, she's ready to start creating the agent itself. So she's given it a name here in the agent builder, and she's going to select the model that she would have deployed to Foundry, that GPT-4o model. So now that it's been loaded, what she'll now need to do is provide the instructions for the model itself. Now, within here in the agent builder, we do have the ability to either provide your own instructions for the model, or you can also use a feature that we have, which is to generate the actual system prompt for the model. If you do select that generate button, what it's going to do is ask you to describe the behavior for the agent itself. And then in doing that description, from there, what it's going to do is generate the system prompt. What we do provide, I will also suggest making sure you read back through it, just to ensure that it's giving you what it is that you would like. However, I do have the system prompt here from Serena that she would have used to create the Cora agent. And from here, what she can now do is chat with the agent over in the chat feature that we have. So in this case, this would be a message from Bruno saying something like, here's a photo of my living room. I'm not sure whether I should go with eggshell or semi-gloss. Could you tell me which one works better based on the lighting and the setup of the room? And so since GPT-4o is a multimodal model, she can also upload a photo, which is what she would have done here. And then when you generate that, the agent itself will process the image, and then its recommendation will be based on what's there. So we can see here in terms of what we got back from the agent, go through the pros and cons of both, whether it's an eggshell finish, a semi-gloss finish. But what's important to point out here is that the model did take that image into consideration, that it's using context in its response to actually guide how it should recommend a type of paint or finish for the agent. Now, what I will point out though is that although right now the agent works or the model works very well with recommendations, what it is missing is the ability to actually bring in any tools, actually bring in any Java products. And so that's where tools like Model Context Protocol or MCP Server will come into play. And so what is the Model Context Protocol or MCP? You can think of it as a secured, structured way for your agents to interact with external tools or services. So whether that's going to be a database, a calendar, an API, or in Serena's case, the Java product catalog. So while Serena could stay focused on the conversation, or Cora could stay focused on the conversation, whereas the lookup of the products or understanding how that database works, that's all going to be the responsibility of using that MCP server from Java. And so all that orchestration is going to be possible in that way. What Cora just needs to know is that there's a tool available that's called Get Products by Name that can be leveraged. So with that said, I'm going to show you what that experience looks like in adding in that tool so that way we can leverage that database. All right, so back here within the agent builder, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. And as you continue to go down, you'll get to the section that says tools. Within the tools, that's where we can go ahead and add in the MCP server. I did have one running that it has all of the Zava products, and it's about 400 different products within that product catalog. As you scroll down in the selection, it's going to be towards the bottom. It's the one that has the tool that's get products by name. That's the only tool we need to bring in here. If there were more tools available that would be helpful for this agent, then I would consider adding it, but we only really need that one for this particular instance. And so now that the tool has been added, we can continue to have more conversations with the agent in hopes that the agent will call on one of the tools that are available from that MCP server. So I'm going to start a brand new conversation here. This time, I am going to also upload that photo again that Bruno would have used. I'm also going to include a prompt that just says recommend eggshell paint for this interior. What we should hope to see is that Cora would have called on the tool and then also recommended one of the Zava products. And so we can see here a tool call is happening. We can also see as we're starting to get that output that Cora is working. And then we get a really great response here that, yes, it has found an eggshell paint from Zava. Cora also explains why it's a good fit, but down here at the bottom, this is how I know it did that tool call, because I also get information about the price as well. I didn't have that information prior to utilizing the MCP server that Zava has, but now I do have access to that. And so this really makes a really big difference when we want to start incorporating more functionality into our agent. Now that we know that Cora can respond and Cora can also leverage the tools that we provided, we also need to just ensure that what Cora is saying is actually accurate. And so this is where evaluations will start to come in. So evaluations is a critical part of the Gen AI Ops process, and that's because in the real world, users, they aren't grading on a curve. And so if your agent gives bad recommendations, then your users, your users, they start to lose trust fast. Your customers aren't losers. No, your users will start to lose trust fast. But Serena uses the AI toolkit to evaluate responses in two ways. First, you can do so manually. With your manual evaluations, it's going to keep a human in the loop. What that consists of is asking a question of the agent, and then once you get the response, as the human, you can then look and say, yes, this is a good response, no, this is a bad response. It's all subjective in terms of how you're evaluating yes or no, but usually you'll have an option to do like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Then there's going to be AI assisted, and this is called something different across platforms you might be using, but it's essentially where you're going to use a large language model to assess the generated output. And that's when you can also start using evaluators like task coherence, relevance. You can use various different evaluators, plus custom evaluators that you may create from scratch. So if you want to evaluate something like friendliness, for example, you can do that, but you would be the definer of what friendliness is. So you do have some options there. These tools, however, what they're really helpful for is helping developers like Serena catch issues early and iterate faster and build trust in the output before going live, because you should be evaluating before you deploy. And so I'm going to show you how Serena uses these evaluators with Cora, all within the AI toolkit. Mm-hmm. All right, so you may notice here that the instructions look a little different because now I have these variables that have been added. And so the product, for example, in this case is going to be one of the variables. When you're doing evaluations in the AI toolkit, this variable will make that value dynamic. So you can pass in different things to represent variable. And so when we actually go through to do the evaluation itself, there's different products that I would enter in doing that. You'll also notice down here, all the variables that you have listed in your system prompt, they'll be collected here within this variable section. You can also just use that when you're chatting with the agent versus just doing evaluations, so you can also fill that in there. Now here within the evaluations tab, you do have the option to generate data. And so why would someone want to generate data? Well, it might not be the case that you actually have data to work with. So with that said, we have this feature in here where you can define how many rows of data you would like. And then we also provide the start of generation logic, but you can modify this as well. It does take that system prompt into account that would have been set up in advance. And then from there, it's going to generate the data that's going to be necessary for doing the evaluations. Now, I had the data set that Serena would have used to evaluate the Cora agent. And so rather than using this particular feature, I can use that instead. But you have that flexibility to go either way in using or generating data or creating data actually to like test your agent. Let me speed up a little bit here. So right now I am uploading that data set that would have been created. It's very simple, nothing complex. It just lists all the different product types I wanna search for. And one thing I will say is that you may notice at the bottom something like glitter. It's not that probably doesn't sell. But when you're doing evaluations, you want to just ensure that you consider all different possible scenarios of what customers may actually ask for. Because you also want to see how the model responds to that sort of that input as well. So in this case, in my user query, I have recommended product from Zava. And then on the product column, within there I have just different products that are listed: drop cloth, paint tray liner, paintbrush, primer, and then glitter, as I mentioned earlier. You can run these row by row, which is what I'm going to do here. You can also run them all at once and get the output overall from the agent as well. And so in this case, I ran the first row, and the response that I get back from Cora is, yes, love to help. So we know Cora's friendly, but now Cora needs more information to actually help out. So if I was really looking for a different response, let's say I want to say no, I didn't like it so much, that's when I would do that down thumbs. Again, good or bad is going to be based on whatever criteria you set. As I can see for this one, I do get a tool call. And so in the response that I have here, even though I did that tool call, it did give me actual Zava product. So yes, this is the sort of output that I would like to get from the agent. As for the next row, for a paintbrush, I know for a fact that Zava sells multiple paintbrushes. So let's see what Cora says back. So yes, Cora's willing and able to help, but needs more details. And this is actually a really good response, actually, because we don't want Cora just randomly recommending anything that might not be relevant for the customer as well. So I'll say this one's going to be a really good response as well. And then just below that, we have two more rows that are going to be left. Yes, so we have one for primer. And let's see how Cora responds for that one. I ran them both at the same time. So again, we have Cora is getting more information before actually recommending the product itself. And then in addition to that, for the glitter one, I would have expected that Cora would have looked up whether Zava even has glitter before following up. But because Cora didn't, I would say I don't like that response. So that's how your manual evaluations would work with the AI toolkit. I did mention that you also have the ability to also do automated evaluations, whereas you're going to be leveraging AI to do the evals. And so with the automated evaluations, with that, you're going to be able to select the different evaluators that you'd like to use for your evals. And we have them categorized with a short description, just in case you're unfamiliar with what each of the different evaluators may be. I also mentioned that you can also create custom evaluators as well. So if you had created any custom ones with the AI toolkit, that would also show in the list of evaluators that are available. I chose 3 of our agent ones, and then also chose coherence, I believe, as well. In addition to that, you can also choose which model you want to use for the automated evaluation. I'm going to go ahead and use that GPT-4o model, that same model that's actually powering Cora. And then from there, you can do an evaluation run. So you may have noticed I selected evaluation only. Alternatively, you can also do response and evaluation. Essentially, what that would do is it would have the model generate an output, and then you would get the evaluation for it itself. So I do see here the evaluation run is complete. But it turns out I didn't have the top ones, the top couple of rows selected. So you can isolate what you want to do an automated evaluation for versus doing the entire data set itself. So here I do have some output from the AI in terms of how it would evaluate or assess the output as well. Now, what do you actually do with this information? Well, you can export to a JSON file, and then you can pass that information over to whoever may be the proper individual in your team that's responsible for iterating over the agents. You can also save the evaluation run as well, and then you can do a new evaluation run later and then compare results, assuming you've made changes to your agent, so you can get an idea of what changes are going to be necessary in order to actually get the agent to respond the way that you would like. So there's a couple things you can do there. So evaluating agents is only going to be effective if your comparisons are well structured. So doing random side-by-sides, it's not really going to reveal what's actually better. You're going to need a consistent, thoughtful approach on how you test. And so otherwise, you might risk misinterpreting the results or chasing improvements that really aren't there. So here's how to make your evaluations count. I have some suggestions here. So first, change one variable at a time. So if agent A, let's say you are using GPT-4, and then for version B, you're going to switch to 4.0, and you gave that agent a new tool, and you gave the agent a new system prompt, well, now you're not comparing apples to apples. You really want to just change one thing at a time and then see if that's the thing that's going to make a difference. So isolating those variables is very important. Next, you also want to use the same test prompts. And so you want to run each of those agents against the same scenario. So ideally, these are scenarios that reflect real-world user needs or any known edge cases as well. And you'll want to see how each version handles that exact same input. You'll also want to evaluate against the same criteria. So if you're doing more like a manual scoring or like a manual evaluation, or automated metrics, then you're just going to want to keep a rubric consistent, so that way you're doing that fair comparison. Also, keeping notes or change logs is going to be super helpful. Even a simple note like V3 adds in whatever tool call or uses a shorter prompt. It's going to just help you keep track of the changes that you're making as well, so you can revisit it later in case you need to make some changes. And then also just watch for some trade-offs. I would say sometimes one version may improve one area like relevance, but then instead it might lose fluency. Or you may be able to improve performance, but then it doesn't do really better with rounding. So testing to help make sure that testing helps surface these tensions so you can prioritize intentionally. So the goal overall is not just to find the best version of the agent, it's to understand why one works better versus the other, and then you can continue to make those iterations over time so you can get an even stronger agent. So back to Serena and Cora. So at this stage, Serena, she's done her evaluations. She's validated that Cora is responding in the way that she would like for her to respond to customer inquiries. But a working agent isn't the same as a working app. So Serena now needs to integrate the agent logic into a real-world product and also needs to get that deployed. So within the AI toolkit, she's actually able to do so. And in doing that, what she'll be able to do is get the code that gets generated for the agent that she would have created. And I'll show you how to get that as well. So here, back within the agent builder, if you scroll down towards the bottom of the screen, we'll have a button on here that'll say to get code. Let's see. Here we go. So down here at the bottom where it says view code, In selecting that, you can then choose your SDK as well of choice. And once you've selected that, you can also choose your language as well, so we don't just hold you only to one language. And then from there, you're going to have your code file. What you choose to do with this code file from here is completely and totally up to you. You're not beholden to any one particular path in creating your agent as you move forward. Just so happens that Serena will be deploying her agent to Azure, but just to let you all know, from here, you can export the code, you can continue to use it in your, whatever it is that you're building. Now, one thing that did happen in the midst of Serena getting her code is that one of her colleagues also happened to have given her the code files or the project files for the UI for the app. So at this stage, Serena could either take the front end files, figure out how to add in the logic. She can spend time doing that, but if you remember, she's low on bandwidth. So what she could do instead is turn to a tool like GitHub Copilot in agent mode. And so for those unfamiliar, GitHub Copilot is like having an autonomous peer programmer right inside your editor. And so instead of doing the manual figuring out where to insert logic, all Serena needs to do is, with the right prompt, submit it. She can add the code files as context in her prompt to GitHub Copilot agent. And then from there, in probably a little less than 5 minutes, she can have everything she needs ready to go, and she can have the logic integrated. And so with that said, I do have Cora available for us to all take a look at. All right, so here we have the Cora agent itself. This is what it looks like when it's up and running. We're going to pass back in that same prompt that Bruno would have done in searching for the right finish for the paint that he's using for his living room. And within here, because GPT-4o, that I mentioned earlier, is a multimodal model, we can add the photo here as well, and then we can start having a conversation with the agent. And so from here, Cora's working, Cora's hopefully doing a tool call, and if not, Cora's gathering the information that's going to be needed to fully recommend whatever it is the customer needs. But in this case, it does appear that Cora did actually do a tool call, because Cora is referencing Java products that are available within that Java MCP server, which is just what we want. And then from here, you can continue the conversation. You can ask other questions that might be within that product information. But the key to show here is that Serena went from having the agent logic. She also had the front end from that developer on her team, and with GitHub Copilot agent modes, able to bring those together in less than 5 minutes. And now we have the start of a really great experience that Serena can continue to iterate on before she gets to deployment. Even right here, we want to know how much that paint is, and we got the price as well from the tool call. So now we get into deployment, because we have an app that's working, and from here we're ready to take it into the real world. So having used GitHub Copilot for Azure, what Serena GitHub Copilot for Azure, what Serena will be able to do is now also continue that conversation with GitHub Copilot and have the guidance that's needed for deployment now to Azure. Works in a similar way that you were using GitHub Copilot. The only difference is that you can now reference Azure in the responses that it's generating, and then from there, in Serena's case, then speaking with the agent is able to help her configure everything in her app to run as an Azure container app. So she doesn't need to go off and do documentation somewhere else to get to a point of deployment. She's still within Visual Studio Code, and she can ask those questions. We're going to get the responses that she's looking for all within this one environment. And then from here, that's where she enters into deployment. And for Java, this is where that investment in Azure does start to pay off, because we have a real scalable agent experience. It's running securely on Azure and has the ability to manage, monitor, and evolve it over time. But this stage isn't just about pushing code. It's where Java starts to realize the full value of the Azure ecosystem. So by deploying to Azure, Java gains more than just compute. They get enterprise-grade infrastructure, security, governance, and lifecycle management tailored for generative AI workloads. And so let's unpack what that actually unlocks for Java operationally and strategically. They're going to get built-in security and compliance. Zava also will gain access to centralized models and agent management systems. And then finally, also Zava benefits from the scalable infrastructure that's purpose-built for generative AI. That's what Azure AI Foundry unlocks for a company like Zava. It's a production-ready, secure platform that supports not just the launch, but the life cycle of their AI-powered customer experience. And then of course, once Cora is live, we also need to take into account things like making sure the agent is healthy and trustworthy and also measurable. That's where observability comes in. So we have tools like the observability dashboard as well. Once Cora is live, we can use tools like this to continue to monitor the performance of Cora. And over time, we can iterate on Cora based on some of the input that's been received from customers like Bruno. This is going to be helpful because if there happens to be a situation where customers are asking certain questions on a certain topic, but they're not getting the answers that they want, we want to know that. And one way you can track that is by engaging with observability and also having this dashboard where you can actually go and find all those different instances where that would have occurred. So today we walked through what it really looks like to go from idea to impact. And so building your first agent to deploying a production-ready AI agent solution that's going to be backed by Azure. We saw how tools like AI Toolkit and GitHub Copilot and Azure AI Foundry fit together for this developer-first Gen AI workflow. And then you saw how developers like Serena, someone low on bandwidth, working under pressure, but still needs to deliver, is able to get all this done through the tools that I shared today. We also saw my technical demo fail, but found a solution around that. But in any case, whether you're a solo developer, part of a startup, or a scaling enterprise system, the tools are available to you right now. You can try GitHub hosted models for free, and you can explore Agent Builder in VS Code as well. I have a couple more QR code slides for you, but before that, the Azure AI Foundry developer community. This is where you can come and post your questions. We have a forum as well. I hang in there, the rest of my team, and some of the product team will also hang in there as well. And so this is where, if you didn't catch the last slide, this is the QR code to access both of those locations. And then one last thing that I have for you all is going to be, let's see, feedback. Did it not go? Oh, it didn't go. All right, I will have to figure out, here we go. This is the best way to show it. So, any feedback for the session? Here's the QR code. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties. It was working before I walked in this room. But in any case, feel free to provide feedback. We do view everything that comes in, use that information to iterate on not just this session, but the entire AI tour experience. So, thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it.